2nd district. Here he goes, crossing himself. Oh! He's done.
Ready for takeoff?
Whoa. Working hard on my stunt, what's the problem? I ain't had shit to show, being modest. Now it's grams of the wax for my conscience. Bron James in LA, you're on college. I've been jumping on them planes like a hobby. Still moving with the pack like my partners. Hit the John on them jets cause we wildin'. But the bowl is a party on the island, moment of silence. So good, get back to the topic. Grew up, it was me and Flocka. Grandma's and Big T, this my mama. I ain't even for the pain when my pots flip. Knew his name, that's it, never bothered. Mom said, you the man, son, you got this. Ever since I found a way to go and pop shit. Hold up, blaze through a whole zip. Took a seat at the table of my first flip. Days in red roof for my first whip. Split the money with the gang, never post pics. Seen a change in the game, had to coach it. Never let them take my wangs in the mold, bitch. Ever made in a month, nigga. Used to serve him at the minute, just the front, nigga. Goddamn. Had to grow up quick, I made my own rules. Had my first child, got it jumping with music. Can't really hang with nobody who losing. I thought by now that you would go and get it, but I could hardly see niggas as distant. Know you get cropped if you not in the picture. And I made that zag and went got a bag. Shots to the Henny and OG prescriptions, put rebel shit on the map. Took a leap from where I started at. Started ballin' now I'm Chris Paul and Cats. Got him steady calling for the mold, but I'm on a roll, gotta call him back. And that's all fact.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. All carry-on items should now be stowed securely, either in an overhead bin or under the seat in front of you. All aisles, exits, and bulkhead areas should now be clear. All electronic devices should now be turned off and stowed, as they may interfere with the aircraft's navigational and communication systems. Once airborne, we'll let you know when you may use approved electronic devices, but note that some items may not be used at any time during the flight. You'll find a list of approved devices in the in-flight information section.
Gang, once again, the United States champion of word wrestling entertainment has returned for another edition of the Pocket Locker Podcast. I am your host with the most all the way from the East Coast. And as always, good people, I am in airplane mode. Folks, we have got another great show lined up for you. Sit back, catch a vibe, greet your neighbor. It's time to jump into the musical portion of the program. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Y'all got it. Look at this. Watch this. Whoops.
When you were here before, couldn't look you in the eye. You're just like an angel. Your skin makes me cry. Yeah, you float like a feather in a beautiful world. I wish I was special.
Cheers, gang.
You're so very special. Oh, but I'm a creep, and I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. Oh yeah, I don't care if it hurts. I wanna have control. Yeah, I want a perfect body. Yeah, I want a perfect, so I want you to notice, oh yeah, when I'm not around, you're so very special.
Lena's in the house.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I was special. Ooh, but I'm a creep. Yeah, yeah. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? Yeah, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. Whatever you want, you're so very special. I wish I was special. Ooh, no, 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 no. But I'm a creep. I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. Oh, no, 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 no. What the hell am I doing here? Oh, I don't belong here. I don't belong here, but I'm a creep.
Yeah, all right, gang. So glad to see you all here. The lovely Lena has joined us. We got one more song for you. Let's go ahead, get into that, and then we will jump into our program. All right.
Yeah. I see the crystal raindrops fall, and the beauty of it all is when the sun comes shining through to make those rainbows in my mind. Is when I think of you sometime. I wanna spend some time with you, just the two of us. We can make it if we try, just the two of us. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Building castles way up high, just the two of us. That's you and I. We look for love, no time for tears. Wasted water, so that is. And it don't make no flowers grow. Yeah. Good things might come to those who wait, but not for those who wait too late. 'Cause we gotta go for all we know. Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Building castles way up high. Just the two of us. That you and I. Let's hear it, Jackie boy. Come on now. on the window down the hall. It becomes a morning dew, yeah. And darling, when morning comes and I see the morning sun, I wanna be the one with you. Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Building castles way up high. Just the two of us. Without you and I. Just the two of us. Building castles way up high. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Building castles way up high. Just the two of us. Well, that's what it's you and I. That's right.
Love it. All right, gang. Let us jump into the main event of the afternoon. And we are joined again by Lena. Lena, where are you? It's just fucking lovely.
That's just my background. In the same place I've always been.
Oh, okay. Cool. We're going to be talking about trendy churches. And the thing that for me is the main thing is it's Daily Disciple, who I don't actually cover much. So we don't actually talk about him or see him a lot on this channel. But also it's just hard to listen to Christians when they start critiquing other Christians, other churches, talking about how manipulative they are, but they're manipulative too. And what church isn't manipulative? I don't how trendy churches manipulate you. This is how all churches manipulate, but it is a little fun to see some Christian infighting. So yeah, I don't know. It's what we've got for today. I definitely saw it. This is actually one that I've heard. I actually checked it out. It's not that long. We were listening to it. And I was raging. I was triggered. I was just like, this is fucking crazy. So that's what we've got up for you today. Go ahead, Lena. Uh-oh. No, I'm not hearing you.
Good insight. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay.
Yeah, I went to Willow Creek Church growing up, so I think I've got insight into the trendy churches. So
Yeah.
I haven't seen this yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I feel like I've definitely participated in the trendy churches. Like, and I'm not gonna lie, I think they're more fun. Like, part of the vibe I get from people like this is they want to do Christianity on hard mode, right? They don't like the easy, accessible, feel good, have a good time, soft. They want Christianity to hurt. You know, they want you to have to put that work in. They want it to be difficult. So let's see if you guys pick up on that vibe too. All right, let's get ourselves a little transform there, and boom.
Whether it's a political speech, an ad for a brand, or an influencer apology, people pride themselves on being hyper-aware of when manipulation is taking place. We feel like for the most part, we've gotten good at picking up signs, language, environment, messaging, and methods that would seek to lead us to a response or control our behavior and decisions. But the truth is, there's been a major blind spot. Viral social media churches. You know the types. People are either ignorant of this massive movement, or they're so immersed in it that they can't really see what's going on. What is going on right beneath our noses in the modern Christian church? I believe it's manipulation. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that every popular church on social media or every mega church is intentionally manipulating their people or manipulating them at all. And I'm not saying that every church that utilizes some of the methods that'll
Yeah, I'll let him continue, but you already know what I'm gonna say.
Every church is manipulating its members.
But the gospel message is manipulative.
The
right?
whole yes, the
but,
whole
But yeah, we're all on the same page.
yeah,
here.
the whole
Roll the
cultures of
tape.
manipulation. Also, it's also kind of like one of those way outs. Like Christians want to have these serious, hard hitting conversations, but at the same time, they don't really want the smoke. So you know, it's like, let's talk about this problem. It's ubiquitous in churches. It's going on everywhere. Sort of in a way, the whole mainstream Christian culture is given over to it. But he's like, let's hang the asterisk. It's not your church. It's not everybody. It's not all pastors. It's not every time you hear the music. It's not every time you see the lights. And so, yes, he's at once obfuscating and making this whole thing safer for his audience, which is just, in a sense, too bad, because it would be cool. It'd actually be more useful as a counter apologist for him to be painting with a bit broader of a brush. But hey, he's
Remind me who this is.
the name of the channel is Daily Disciple. I don't know what this person's name actually is.
Point out in this video is doing so out of a malicious intent, or the intent to manipulate. They may very well just be following the trends, and yes, they should be held accountable for that, but it is different. However, often, unfortunately, the results are the same. In this video, I'm going to point out 4 key practices that I've observed that I want you to be aware of when you're going to a new church, or you see a social media video online that's going to help you discern things a little bit more clearly. First practice is overwhelm.
Well, Steph, Hillsong has lots of issues. There's a lot of those, you know, Bethel or whatever, those kind of international name brand, you know, worship ministries, Planet Shakers. But you know, I know them because I like some of their music. You get exposed to it when you play it in the churches or whatever. And yeah, it's a whole thing. But I think it is a broader trend in Christianity where so much of the Christian experience is worship led. Like, people go where they enjoy the worship experience. Because let's face it, for most people, that's church, right? Church is where you go and what you do on Sunday. And just like people are going to go to their favorite restaurant where they like the food, they're going to do the same thing in terms of churches. But it does create a problem, because it's like you deal with people who are so committed to the faith, and they're so wrapped up in that emotional sort of feedback loop. It's really difficult to even get them to sort of take a step back and wrap their heads around what's really going on, what the doctrine is, what the faith is really all about, maybe the influence of the church in the world. They just don't think of it like, to them, Jesus is just that amazing, unbelievable feeling they get when they're listening to worship music on the way to work, and you know, when they're in church on Sunday.
Well, especially when they're told that all the other Christians aren't real Christians, but they know that they have a
100%.
relationship with Jesus. So, you know, it's this constant, I don't have a religion, I have a relationship, you know, everyone else is doing it wrong sort of mentality that is really conducive to that sort of delusional mindset.
Absolutely. And it's just becoming increasingly common, such that now it's like sort of what we expect. Yeah, Steph, you may be getting an echo from Lena. I had to mute Lena in a gather.
Overstimulating and hyper emotional worship. Now, we need to distinguish between 2 things here. We need to distinguish between the method and the message. Now, let's talk about the method first. 2 things come to mind that I've observed personally is repetition and fatigue. Melodies, mantras, seemingly repeated endlessly with a combination of the overstimulation of lights, atmospheric haze, just everything that's going on. It can almost put you in a state of hypnosis. Now, I do need to clarify, I don't think there's there's anything innately wrong with repetition. The scripture is full of repetition to get your attention. But what I'm talking about here ultimately is this intention to try to get the person to stop paying attention, basically. It's kind of the opposite in a way, to put you in this space of just kind of emptying your mind and not really thinking about what you're saying, because when you say something over and over and over and over and over again, it loses its meaning. Part of what we'll discuss.
All right, so pause tape. It's it's funny to me because he did start with the opening, right? That this happens in politics and this happens in, you know, marketing and celebrity cover-ups and all this type of stuff. You know, this is just part of culture. And also, it's weird for me as a worship musician. It's like, bro, do you not understand how concerts work? Do you not like know how music works? Like, in a sense, it's supposed to be this way, right? Like, just like when you're at a Trump rally and you're chanting, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. The reason people are doing that is because it's like a chorus and they can all participate and they you know, feel the resonance of everybody else around them chanting it, so in a sense, this is a very you know, there's two sides to this, right? And it is actually interesting to me that he's sort of critiquing aspects of this process as though they're kind of secretive, but they're really not. Like, that's just like it's sort of very deliberate. So it's kind of an easy target because it's just how it works. It's just what you do. It's how you put on a good show, and it's how you make a good song. And so it's sort of weird. It's not weird to hear somebody analyze it, but it's weird to hear people problematize it. And if you don't know what I mean by problematize, it's like exactly what it sounds like. It's an actual word, just means to like make something an issue, right? To convey something or to explain something as to make others aware that it is in fact a problem, right? Yeah, you know, it's like I don't know what he wants to do, right? But he gives you that vibe that he thinks churches should, you know, like either not do these things or significantly tone back these things. But, you know, to me, that just leads to dry worship. Like, worship is supposed to be, I don't know, to me, it's like, it's supposed to be exciting. It's supposed to be cool. It's supposed to be a happening. I don't know. So me and him definitely just don't want to go at the same church. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Lena, do you have any thoughts on this? Yeah, non-stimulating music only, please.
Same.
Yeah, like, fuck, even as non-believers, we want to go somewhere that's fun to be on Sunday morning. Like, oh, man.
I've found every church I've been to has been either the same old evangelical rock, or it's been even more regressive than that, and like, you know, just like choir music or something like that. So,
yeah.
And there was a phase I was into Christian rap, but that didn't last long.
Yeah, same. I definitely had a phase. I was into Christian rap. There are some Christian rappers who are really good rappers, but I couldn't do it now. Like, there's no way now to sound hard about Jesus. Like, I went through a phase where I thought that was the thing, and now when I look back, like, you can't be hard about Jesus. Like, it just doesn't work. Yeah. All right, let's roll the fucking tape. But yeah, the CCM, I always say this. This is how real it is, gang. This is how real it is. Once you start to play that music and get in the sort of rhythm of like what it takes to prepare, say, to play at your church from week to week or whatever, you could literally just go to pretty much any other evangelical church in the country and you could play their service the following week. Like, that's how standardized it is. Everybody's playing the same songs. They're playing the same arrangement of those songs. So, you know, if a service is like you're gonna have to do 5 or 6 songs, when you get the song list, you're already gonna know 3 of them, right? And then you're used to preparing, 2 or 3 new songs a week or whatever, and so you'll get, and they're going to be similar style. It's not going to be outside. It's just really that standardized, gang. It's just really, so, and to be honest, again, not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, because I mean, I get the function of it, right? Like, as musicians, that's how all of that works, right? How it works is you play to click tracks. It's you play to the same click tracks. You play to the same arrangements. It just kind of makes life easier, but it does, it does mean that like everybody knows those songs, and that's kind of interesting too, because there's a demand for that, right? Like, part of what Sunday worship and is comfort food. And it is playing, it's like Wayne talks about playing the greatest hits. Like, it's like when your favorite, like a classic artist comes out and, says they don't have any new music to do for that show. The crowd goes crazy. Why? Because they came to hear their favorites. They came to hear their hits. And so ministries know that, and they want to make sure, okay, we might throw in a new song because we're trying to get you accustomed to something we want to become part of your familiar catalog of music, but we're definitely going to hit you with a couple of the classics because we know that's going to make everybody feel good. Everybody's going to be singing along. Everybody's going to love the lyrics, and they're going to tell us what a great time they had afterwards.
Discover with this video is there's nothing necessarily wrong innately with a lot of things that I'm going to point out here. It's when they get out of hand that emotional manipulation can take place, whether inadvertently or intentionally. Now, I do admit it's hard to draw hard and fast lines, especially when it comes to worship or repetition or how many times or how loud can it be or how many lights you have and all that kind of thing. I understand it's hard to draw a hard and fast line, but I do believe it exists, and it's something that we should think about. It shouldn't just be something that, okay, we can do whatever we want because it is the most entertaining or it's the most visually interesting. Because ultimately, worship, when we get to the heart of it, the method is that you don't want to be so distracting that you lose focus on what is the main attraction, who should be God. You may very well have been in some of these environments and have walked away experiencing God's presence or feel like, oh man, I really felt the Lord close to me in those moments.
Because this speaks to the total contradiction, right? We all know that they go to church for the music, that it's about what you get out of it, right? But then we play this game where we pretend that we're doing something of meaning or significance to this entity that we're supposed to love and care about, and it rang empty when I was doing it then at some points in time. Like, other times I felt, emotionally overwhelmed. But when I really reflected on what we were doing, it just felt silly, and it is silly. And once I realized it wasn't a God worth worshiping, that made it a lot easier. But even before that point, it felt off.
Yeah, no, and this is what I mean about Christianity on hard mode, right? Like, none of them became Christians for intellectually sound reasons. Yet, as they grow up into this apologist phase or grown as Christians, all of a sudden they've got to play these intellectual games and talk about all this intellectual rigor, but it was never about that to begin with. And this is the same thing where, like we said, it's their experience is worship led. They're there because they like the worship experience. They're there because
we've always been doing it. It's a human thing.
Yes, and then you're right. We play this double speak, right, where it's like, oh no, it's about, and then it's supposed to be about China. And this is where they get into the, I don't know how else to say it, but conviction culture, where there's sort of two things to do to make a great service, or or and you can kind of go either or you can, you know, do an emotional ride. But the thing is, there's the emotional peak of the feel good, right? The Jesus high, the we're all together, the God is love, the let's put our hands in the air. And that could be up tempo, could be down tempo, doesn't matter. But then the other thing is the conviction culture, right? That's the other emotional spike. It's like the negative emotional spike, right? Where it's like he died for our sins. Look at me in my wretched ways. I'm so unworthy, you know. And that's where they get into like the sacrifice porn of it all, right? Like really being graphic about he died for you and you don't deserve
And we just need
it.
to reject their language. We need to say it's not a worship service. It's a cult, you know, ritual sacrifice dance, you know, and it's we just gotta not play their double speak, you know. We gotta be really clear about what that is and how weird it is, and just pointing out the obvious.
So this is something where I think what we do on these channels in this new media space actually matters or can matter, because part of my frustration is exactly what you're talking about, Lena, that we are not honest with these people. We will not have grown person to grown person conversations with them to even tell them, like, I don't believe what you're saying, or I have serious issues with your faith or whatever. And that's a huge part of it is, you know, having a community, having a place where you can get new language, because that can actually meaningfully shift the conversation. Now, we don't have control of who actually puts it into use, but that would be a huge step to really just acknowledge that this is a cult, this is a blood cult, you know, you don't have a relationship with Jesus, like really redefine.
They're not worshiping.
Yes. And I think that it's so weird. Like, I don't know what to think, because on one hand, I think we live in this super religious time still, and it feels like we're never going to see the day where the you know, the momentum truly shifts.
Does any revolutionary see the fruits of their labor?
I don't think so, or rarely. And if so, you know, then there's
At least not the full fruits. You know?
Yes. And if so, then there's a question about, were you really the revolutionary? Were you sort of, you know, part of it at the end, right? Like, did you just help push it across the finish line or something? But yeah,
that seems to be the general trend these days. Is once champion heroes of the atheist community now fallen.
Yeah, well, that's you know, well, you know, for a lot of them, I think they brought it on themselves, to be honest with you. So, but you know what? Like, on the other hand, I really think the sort of disempowerment of religion can happen quickly. And it can happen quickly because I really think the key is to making it not cool. Like, they're just, you know, like take racism, for instance. Like, I still deal with so much fucked up shit. And a lot of it, or too much of it, comes from being in like the gaming space. And, you know, online gaming culture is just fucking toxic. And so the shit that I hear, the shit that people do, which is crazy because you're in an anonymous space. And so you have no reason to believe black people might not hear the racist shit you say, but they fucking do it anyway. They nevertheless operate under that assumption. Like, black people don't play video games.
Well, it's because it doesn't affect. You can't.
Yeah. You can't go upside your head. Exactly. But there are still unintended consequences that they face, right? And, you know, shit happens, but yeah, it's just different.
Did I freeze or did Jay freeze? Are you there, Jay? We're having some technical difficulties. Okay, yeah, it seems like we lost Jay for a sec. So I'm not sure where he was going with that point, but I can just bring it back to addressing the gentleman on the screen, or who was on the screen, and that he's part of the problem. Right? We have these Christians running around calling out other Christians with no self-awareness, and I think that's a good thing, because it leads to more, division within the in group. But when we see this sort of cafeteria style cookie cutter Christianity, it can actually backfire and add to the echo chambers, add to the cult factor. So I'd like to be able to reach out to this guy. He seems like I don't know. It's hard to tell Christians how crazy they are. But yeah, I just like to sit down with him and get his doctrine straight, and see what cobwebs lie in there. I can take a moment to check the chat if you'd like. YouTube punk, damn you, Jesus. We got the heathens out here. Hey Sal, good to see you. Jay said he'll be back in a minute, that's good. Hey Trees, I love you. So yeah, it's why I'm thinking about the church I grew up at and the ways in which it presented itself as this almost secular in the way that it adopts modern. We had like the big projector screen in the big cafeteria area. They had a cafeteria at the basically a campus is what it was. I'm talking about Willow Creek, the church I went to, the mega church. And they had, video games. They had this giant inflatable ball we would do this big volleyball game with. People got hurt. That was dangerous. But yeah, it was super fun. I like all good memories except for, those moments where the pastor got up there and said some weirdness. And looking back, it's always some attempt to spin passages that if you just read the whole passage from the Bible, it'd be like really concerning. Right? Or you have a lot of people like questioning, like, hold on, what is this saying? But the way in which the pastors are able to pick out certain verses and then tie it into their, glossed over representation of the narrative. And then you go into your small group sections afterwards, and no one can really make sense of it. And you're trying to pick through this Bible with a bunch of other kids, and you're just highly unproductive. A lot more social, a lot less actual learning going on there. Yeah, YouTube Punk. It was I forgot what we called it, but it was a giant inflatable ball, and you could not like catch it by yourself. You needed your team to come around you. So if you were by yourself when it was coming down, you'd be in trouble. Yeah, Sal, you gotta be careful with that one. I was a bit afraid the first year, so I didn't play for a bit. But yeah, and then I compare that experience to the church I went to recently, and it had the same exact vibe, same exact music. The pastor spoke the exact same way. The only difference is that I was able to really listen critically, and hearing all of the buzzwords, they actually said anti-interracial marriage, but anti-modernity, anti-technology, or pro-family, all of these buzzwords, talking about protecting their children. And it's just like, they play the game so well, but they know they're a cult. They know, like, it's victims become victimizers, and they're quite good at it, whether they know it or not. They are very manipulative.
Yeah, they really are. And I don't know, like, it's Lena, can you hear me?
I think I'm echoing.
Oh, I don't know where. Maybe because I just popped in Gather. But yeah, I don't. Where were you?
Okay, I have you muted in Gather. Yeah, that fixed it.
That's probably better. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I actually think that this is sort of where Christianity is at. Like, when you think about this, push towards this mainstream sort of feels worship type thing, the fact that most Christians aren't reading their Bible, it's just yeah, I don't know. This is where it's sort of at these days. And like you said, this guy has no self-awareness, like none, because the apologetics movement in its entirety is nothing but a manipulation, right? It's just the sort of dried out, let me make you feel serious. Let me make you feel like you're a grown person. Let me make you feel like you're pursuing the tough questions. And again, the intellectual side of Christianity. But there is no intellectual side of Christianity. Like, if you like,
can I give you the hot take, Jay, on that?
Go ahead.
There's no intellectual side of atheism. The recently deconverted, most of the deconstructed, I think they fall into the same category, where they realize it's BS and they got themselves out, but they don't see the thing for what it is. They don't see how manipulative it is. And hopefully that's changing, and it has been changing. But it's just one of the problems I see in the atheist community, where we're not taking the issue seriously enough, where we're playing these intellectual games with them, where we allow them to engage in that dishonesty freely without drawing the further assumptions that should be drawn, that are more than obvious at this point. And that doesn't mean calling individual people liars or evil, but we have to call out the problem somehow. And so, yeah.
Yes, and to feed off of that, like I got to a place where I was very frustrated with the sort of atheist community or whatever that I was finding through the content, and it got to a point where it felt racist for me. Like I'm just being honest with the emotions I felt, especially like, before I, started the channel and everything. It got to a point where it felt like we were playing these games, like we were having these conversations about all the evidence and the philosophical arguments. And first off, I wasn't seeing any representation, right? Like none. I was just hearing, like I said, the white boy problem, bunch of white boys citing a bunch of historic white boys. And it felt like they were not even thinking about how serious this faith is taken in other communities, particularly communities of color. And it is literally this feeling like my family's in a cult. I don't think I could deal with these motherfuckers. They're not in reality. Religion is tearing our families apart generation after generation. And then we're going to sit around and talk about William Fuckface Craig. I mean, I've definitely gotten a lot out of it, but yes,
it just speaks to how apologetics was always a distraction.
Right. And we're part of it, counter apologetics, which is also a distraction. And we're not having the conversations we need to have, which is the directness, like letting the people know that this isn't true, ... and it's not okay to continue it. Like this is, and even thinking of my own family, like the side I saw of my mother when I tried to talk about this was horrifying. And I don't think most people are just avoiding it. People are just avoiding it. And you know what?
There's a lot more conversation about free speech and free religion and free expression, and not the actual content of that freedom.
Ooh, that's
right? Just because we want freedom of religion doesn't mean we want Christianity. We don't. We don't want it.
No, that's super. That's a super great way to put it. Yeah, and I even think like, all right, this is gonna sound tough. So like, try not to take it personally, gang. It's just a thing I feel is going on with a lot of people, and I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but just think about what it really means. All right, there's a lot of people in our community who will not have this conversation with family or friends, right? Cool. You don't want to have an argument over Thanksgiving dinner. I get it. But think about how many of those people, when you think about it deep down inside, it's because you genuinely know it wouldn't go well. Like you genuinely know that they've basically committed themselves to this cult for life and they're sold out. And then think about the authority that you probably have in this person's life. Like this person probably loves you. They probably think you're wonderful. Now, if you talk to this person critically about anything else, they'll listen to you, right? Like if you say, stop buying Tyson chicken, that company's corrupt and there's too many antibiotics in it, they will find other chicken to buy at the store.
Depends how political it is, but yeah.
For the most part, right? But when it comes to this, here it is, you're telling them just the actuals and the factuals, like, hey, this Christianity thing isn't grounded in reality or whatever. And there's no give, there's no budge. They literally, we literally think people would be devastated their whole lives. Like this is just craziness. So a lot of us are in an avoidance pattern, and we've allowed that to start to feel normal. Like that's okay. That's not okay. What name any other area of life where somebody could be part of a crazy tyrannical cult that's literally ruining the country and will just be like, do 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 do. So is the game on yet? Did it? Like literally, like you're not gonna roll up in the KKK.
You're adding to the normalization of it. Yeah.
Adding to the normalization. I think in some cases we're responsible for it. Responsible for it. I know that sounds like a hot take, but you have to understand at some point you're the best person to do it. I hate to say that, but when you look at the life of a lot of Christians, most of the people in their lives are Christians. So you can't expect the Christians around them to unchristian them. You can't expect the church to fuck around and this Sunday a pastor's gonna have a change of heart and he's gonna be like, you know what, gang, I've been actually doing some, and man, I ran into this guy named Matt Dillahunty and holy shit, gang, I had it all the way fucked up. So here, yeah, listen here, like that's never gonna happen. That's never gonna happen.
I was about to say, you can't expect them to click on the video you send them.
Exactly. A church that has a pastor that has a change of hearts is no longer the pastor. And so then even if there's people in their life of other religions, they're not gonna fucking push that button because they believe in their own magic woo-woo bullshit too. So then you're like, how many other non-believers are actually in the life of most super Christians?
That they're not going to be too afraid of.
That they're not going to be too afraid of. I mean, that's, you know, and probably most of the other Christians in their life are, the other non-believers in their life are like 4 or 5 steps removed. You know, like a coworker they barely talk to, or, you know, their third cousin that they don't even, you know what I mean? Like it's not
And
a
that's
person
it. For
really
most people, there
life.
is no representation.
Yeah, and so then you gotta, so then it's on us, and then we as the only people in their life who are affected by it, who all know it isn't true, who can speak to it, you know, from an intelligent perspective and all of that, we're just not willing to do it. So to me, like that's why I say we kind of are responsible for the normalization of a lot of it because we just go along with it. And again, I get people have very practical, pragmatic reasons to do that in a lot of cases, but maybe not as many cases as we think. All right, let's.
I've said my case on it. Yeah, roll the tape.
Let's try to see if I can find out where we were.
In the meantime, I'll check the chat. Hey, Carrie Ann. Welcome back.
All right, gang. We're gonna try to figure out where we're at here.
Manipulation can take place, whether inadvertently or intentionally. Now, I do admit it's hard to draw hard and fast lines, especially when it comes to worship or repetition or how many times or how loud can it be or how many lights you have and all that kind of thing. I understand it's hard to draw a hard and fast line, but I do believe it exists, and it's something that we should think about. It shouldn't just be something that, okay, we can do whatever we want because it is the most entertaining or it's the most visually interesting. Because ultimately, worship, when we get to the heart of it, the method is that you don't want to be so distracting that you lose focus on what is the main attraction, who should be God. You may very well have been in some of these environments and have walked away experiencing God's presence or feel like, oh man, I really felt the Lord close to me in those moments. Maybe in those moments you really did experience God in a close and personal way. And if that's the case, that's awesome. But maybe, just maybe, you were overstimulated and exhausted and emotionally drained, and that puts you in a vulnerable place where you felt like this deep experience. In a lot of ways, I think it's like the youth camp effect. You know, you go to youth camp and you're so hyped and you didn't get a lot of sleep.
So I just wanted to say I've been to like these conferences, you know, like the young adult or like youth kind of conference-y thing. And it's just in like a big convention center or whatever. And there is like, you know, like usually like a big worship concert like every night and maybe a service in the middle of the day and all this other shit. But yo, it's fun. Like it's fun. You're like hitting the town. You're like meeting hella new people. It's just a little, Yeah, it's part of it. But I was also wondering, even in his case, Lena, like, how do you think he became a Christian? Like, I gotta imagine
He was born a Christian.
He either grew up in it, yeah,
He grew up in it.
or he's had the traditional church experience, and that's what reinforced his faith, right? So again, he's probably an example of it himself.
Sleep and you're hanging out with all your friends and maybe you're worshiping and maybe there's an altar call and everybody comes to the front and everybody's so whipped up emotionally, but then you go home, you go back to everyday life and you kind of go on unchanged in a lot of ways. Next thing we need to focus on here is the message, which a lot of people would consider to be primary, even above the method. So when we think of the message in worship, we're thinking about the lyrics. Are they testifying to who God is, in praise of God, in confession of sin, or are they mainly focused on kind of my miracle power or my resurrection power that I have within myself?
Confessing your own sins is still selfishness. You're still just focusing on what you need for your problems, for you to be cleansed, so that you can feel good.
Yes. And also just this, it pisses me off because Christians don't deal with real problems. They never preach about, the inequities, the injustices, the things that are really going on in the world because they're too busy worried on themselves. They were fantasizing, lusting, they were beating their meat, they were drinking Saturday night. Typically
focusing on being a sinless person is not actually contributing to being a good person.
Exactly.
Self and what I can do. Like, these are the things that we got to be thinking about, because who is the attention on with those songs? Is it about what I can do or what God has done? How often is the gospel, clear and simple, being preached within the songs that you're singing? Or are they only focusing on one aspect of the gospel or one aspect of the Bible or one aspect of the reality that we're living in? Because there's nothing wrong with a song that hones in on one part, whether that's our sin and needing repentance or forgiveness or truth or new creation in Christ and what that empowers us to be. But when all your songs that you're singing are focused around one thing, that's all people are going to focus on. If it's just all about, man, what I can do now, and like, man, I'm so, I'll find victory and I'm just going to push down every boundary because I am strong and I am powerful. Like, if that's all your songs is...
But dude, that's what the whole faith is about. First off, the Bible promises to give Christians magic powers. So imagine...
For if my God is with me, who then shall stop me, or something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's you're depersonalizing it, but as we've already discussed, people project their own ego onto their deity. This is how they both, avoid responsibility and claim ownership over their experiences. And it's disturbing to watch this guy do this form of doubling down where he's gonna pierce through the veil and criticize the Christians who don't get it as the Christian who does get it. And it's just really ironic.
And even the whole function of being saved from sin so you can live forever and cheat death. I mean, I can't imagine something more selfish and self-motivated. And again, he hasn't noticed that God hasn't done anything. And again, you can't tell me this guy doesn't know about evolution. You can't tell me that he has, he doesn't have enough reason to question and doubt his faith. He just won't do it. And and
even if he didn't, I mean, living under a rock is no excuse to be making this sort of content.
That's
this is a form of propaganda that he's doing, and it's harmful, and he can't. There's no excuse of ignorance at this point.
100%.
Are about, right? And even if you kind of throw in God, that it's all through God, you're kind of presenting that particular reality. You're not giving people a full orbed view of the gospel and the Bible in general. And I think that's so powerful. I've heard certain churches do this, and I think this is really cool to have kind of a narrative to your music throughout the service, to begin with kind of creation and the fall, and to see our sin and rebellion, and then repentance and faith in Jesus and him coming to die, and seeing the gospel clear and simple and what that empowers us to do, and the motivation and the empowerment of the church moving from that place. I think that's such a cool narrative to point out, as opposed to honing into one.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is Christianity is all consuming, right? You are never given enough to Jesus. And again, like, it's like, even just the systematic targeting of young adults, where they get you in the college ministry, and then by the time you graduate, you're supposed to be all about church planting. So then they get you to like pick up and move to a random place in the world or country, and abandon your career prospects so that you can, you know, help them build more propaganda mills. And I just don't know why we don't really start to confront this as atheists, because if we did, it would go a long way to making Christianity not cool anymore. And I hate to make it sound so 8th grade, but at this point, I think it's that 8th grade. We really need to stop. They think this is cute. People do Christianity because they think it's cool and they think it's cute. They literally think it's a good look socially. And if we treated them like it was gross and horrible, and also kind of ridiculous, so we just laughed at them every time they mention it, people would stop being Christians quickly. Yeah,
mission trips need to be seen the same as the Mormon ones.
Yeah,
Christians have
exactly.
That's the kind of, but that's again more the double speak, where they're able
but you know what, the
they're
ones
able
that
to point out cult behavior elsewhere, but not within themselves.
And the ones that are truly trying to be hardcore, they admired that shit. They're like, oh, look at what those great Mormons do for their faith. They'll just give it all up for, and it's like, wow. Like, it's just craziness.
One block and just kind of only talking about that within your music. The second area where manipulation may be happening is something that I don't hear people refer to very often, but if you ever watch kind of a trendy church sermon, you'll see that there are people in kind of bleachers behind the pastor. So when you're in the audience, you see all these folks back there. And when the pastor's preaching, pretty much everything that he says is getting a hearty amen, preach it. You know, it's this kind of verbal encouragement, this verbal affirmation. And ultimately, like I said before, there's nothing innately wrong with that. But when it's constant, when the pastor kind of gives off the weakest analogy that you've ever heard, and you hear somebody say, oh my goodness, and then he starts dancing around thinking that he came up with something that's super powerful, even though it's not super deep, it begins to almost gaslight you into thinking that something's deeper than it really is. Like, wow, people are really reacting in a powerful...
Yeah, he actually going to start talking about that. He's actually going to start...
I wonder if he'll become an atheist in a few years. I kind of have hope for him.
That's interesting, and that's the other thing, is that sort of deconversion. I think it's becoming just increasingly common, right? I think even with the cuts in church attendance and identity you've seen since COVID, it just tells you. I think that was like an accelerant got poured on the whole thing. So it's hard to say like who will actually deconvert, but it's definitely at play for so many of these people, and it's hard to kind of predict, you know what I mean, like who will go on the right trajectory. But it is fun to think about that. It's definitely fun, but it can be hard. So for instance, a lot of y'all have seen the journey I've kind of gone on with Rebecca Davis, and that's why. That's you know, there's a lot of reasons I fucking can't stand Rebecca Davis. Let's be honest, but one of the very significant ones is sort of that interpersonal disappointment that like I really saw her as someone who was genuine, and she was really trying to learn and find the truth, and she was making community and friends with all these atheists. And I actually saw her as part of the atheist community, because that's how I first got exposed to her, right? And then I like learned later, like, oh, she's got 2 channels and she's anti-science and she has a fucking master's degree in fucking apologetics. Holy shit. And then I got to
I'll
learn
have to look into this guy.
I had to figure out, once I learned what an insincere person she was, so I don't have hope for that anymore. I'm like, she's a fucking grifter. But yeah, I don't know
how long
that
they've
much.
been doing it. There's a lot of signs.
There's a lot. And you don't even always know on those things, because there's people in the chat or people in our community who are like, went to school to be preachers or wanted to be apologists or whatever, right? I'm just saying it's hard to predict, but it's fun to try.
Powerful way here. I guess I should feel the same way, and this is where kind of manipulation grounds its roots, because you're seeing these people behind the pastor, they're front and center, and believe me, they're placed there so then you can see them, so you can see their reactions, and in a lot of ways, so you can mirror their reactions. You can quickly get lost in group think and lost in the hype in general. Man, everybody's getting riled up about this one analogy that the pastor's doing and thinking it's so powerful, but then it takes you to take a couple steps back and you're thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't really pan out.
Pointed that out.
Not only wait a minute, it doesn't make sense, but wait a minute, he just took these 2 passages that were almost next to each other, but he took out the middle one where it talks about, burning the offerings or beating the slaves, some fucked up thing. And it's like, is this even what the story's about? Is he getting the metaphors right? Is he interpreting the mythology as the author intended? Like, all of this is questionable, on top of it being ancient backwards savagery.
Yeah, absolutely. And it promises more of the same, right? Every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess, and God's gonna come back and smite all his enemies, and all their music's about war. But then again, the sermons, or how many of the pastors, he wants to skip the worship service that's all about spiritual warfare so we can get straight to the fucking sermon about spiritual warfare. I mean, it just
but it's all about love.
But it's all about love. And again, yeah, it's wild.
And this is the frustration I have with the atheist community, who push this idea that Christianity is just all about love. It's something that we as people who advocate for people's deconstruction and helping people process leaving religion, it's something that we need to do a better job at.
Yeah, and I think it's going to come through getting comfortable with the uncomfortable conversations, and not just practicing sort of a form of radical honesty. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We should not participate in their propaganda. I get frustrated even that we don't talk more about it on streams and in the community. But I sometimes wonder how much of it is just Christian residue. Like, so many of us were brought up Christians, or Christians in a very important formative time of our life. And so a lot of their social programming is still in us. So like, love your enemy, and the civility politics and notions of grace and all of this type of stuff that really is religious propaganda, we still kind of buy into. Like, in other words, we're trying to take down Christianity using Christianity's toolkit, which is purpose-built not to be effective at taking down Christianity. So, I do think for a lot of us, we need to relearn how to deal with conflict, essentially.
That's the face I have when I think about counter apologetics now.
Yeah, this face. It was a great, perfect pause moment. What are we doing?
No, maybe this isn't even according to the Bible. And you got to be asking yourself, man, are people's Bibles open, or are we just giving complete affirmation to whatever the pastor says? Look, yeah, I go to a Baptist church. It's not the most, oh, amen, pastor. Oh, yeah, preach it, pastor kind of church. Like, I get it. It's a different cultural kind of deal. But at the same time, when it is so overblown that I've seen it on some of these churches.
Again, his church has it right. His church has got it down. He's dipped his little toes in the water at some of those other churches, only to realize that they don't got the right mojo. But now his place has got it figured out. So he's gonna speak about some of those other churches, and it's just right there for you. And again, like whatever that is a manipulation. Right? So it's just weird. Like when the pastor gets up on Sunday morning and he says, we're not one of those churches with $500,000 in audio video equipment, and we just have a little guy up here on guitar, strumming our hymns. We don't do a big light show. We don't have a 12-piece band. Okay, all right. This is really, it's just so that this allows us to focus on the heart of God. Okay, it allows us to focus on the gospel message. Now let's start.
It's their brand of the grift.
Exactly. It is literally just. You said, honey, I don't want to take you to the big Taylor Swift show at the fucking arena. We're going to go to the little fucking singer-songwriter thing at the fucking jazz club. And that's where the cool kids are. Like,
and while it's paused, can I note that his background is quintessential trendy pastor? He's got the lights without the lamps. He's got the bookshelf.
The cold read on this dude is youth pastor vibes turns apologist, right? Like William Lane Craig and all those guys, they're a little up there. They're a little stuffy. They don't really have the vibe, right? He's got the youth pastor vibe, but he's going to be a hardcore apologist. Like that's you're 100% right.
Web pages or some of the churches that I've attended in the times that I've looked for a church, it just becomes to this point where you're like, okay, this isn't authentic. This is just completely manufactured in order for us to kind of mirror these responses, which I just think is disingenuous. And maybe people don't know that they're doing this, but ultimately creating that culture of just complete endorsement of whatever the pastor is saying is dangerous to me. The third area where manipulation takes place, and it's probably the most obvious, is within the sermon. So many quote unquote sermons these days are just glorified TED Talks. They're ultimately about me and how I can live a better life with biblical principles. Old Testament passages and stories become a tale of how I can overcome the Goliath in my life, as opposed to Jesus being the greater David, the greater king, the greater.
This is like when me and Uncle Bobby were reviewing the pastor who was calling out Trumpism, and it was like, yeah, we agree with everything you're saying.
And this speaks to the American. This speaks deeper. This speaks to American individualism, right? This speaks to the idea that being an adult means buying your own groceries, right, and doing your own daily chores, instead of thinking maybe being adult is figuring out solutions to these things that mean ending the problem, right? Solving the problem of groceries, right? Creating a food system where everyone gets their drone delivered Amazon, grocery packages every week, and nobody has to pay for it. It's not unrealistic, and that's what I think being an adult means, is looking at the world's problems and saying, how can I address these issues in a way that doesn't just focus on what I need, but really places the focus on what matters more than that for society and for others, for the people we love.
And we could solve that and so much more, to me, if we would just tax the rich and tax the churches. And the ironic part is the church will not support paying their fair share, and they won't support taxing the rich.
Is that too edgy?
What?
Eat the pastor?
Eat the pastor. Yeah, but it's crazy because the church itself could solve so many real world problems, but it doesn't want to, because that would reduce dependence on the church. It's just fucking awful. So it's like part of the focus of the ministry that they don't talk about is keeping the rest of us dependent on the good faith of religious institutions, which is fucking bullshit.
Defeater of our ultimate enemy, sin and death. The vast majority of what you'll see is topical sermons. Pastors having an issue that they want to address. There's nothing wrong with a topical sermon from time to time, but ultimately, if you're kind of popping around from place to place, hitting on what you think is most important, you're going to miss some of the more challenging aspects of the scripture that should be addressed from the pulpit, but maybe, it just doesn't fit in your sermon series, or, we just don't get to that, or that's not as popular. It gives you that flexibility to kind of only hone into the things that you think might get views or might get more attention, as opposed to the other stuff that is a little less popular but is equally important. And this is where manipulation is taking place here, is because people think that they're being fed. People think that they're getting this really solid, biblical framework and foundation, but ultimately they're just being fed milk or a pastor's hot take, something that would be good for a YouTube video or a TikTok or an Instagram reel, but now is just kind of converted into a sermon. Like, there is a difference. There's a lot of good stuff that can be said and good life teaching that can be talked about and conversations that need to happen. But we need to recognize that church is something different. It's not just where the pastor spits off his hot take of the day, but rather is exegeting the scripture to help us understand what it says so we can be fed.
Again, exegeting the scripture. Exegeting is just straight Christianese. It is just making up bullshit scriptural interpretations, but they make up their own cult language. I don't believe we just let people walk around pretending that exegeting the text is a legitimate exercise.
Make you feel like they're going really deep, but ultimately, what are they spurring you on towards? It's this moralistic, therapeutic deism, this kind of idea that God just kind of wants to make you feel good and make you live.
Pause the tape. That is the exact same thing that the local church said. And this was, by the way, in a list, a whole slew of things that they were warning their youth parents, all of the congregation who had children in the church, warning them about interracial marriage, modern, I forgot what the word, it was some sort of innuendo for LGBT, anti-technology, and on that list was moral therapeutic deism. They have this aversion to forms of Christianity that reject the toxic elements and maintain, the sort of emotional investment that people have placed in it. And I think it's important to note that we're not necessarily trying to take that away from people if it's a useful stepping stone, even if it's not a stepping stone, even if it's just a step down from, it's just a little less fashy, then that's a good thing. But I think it's so telling that he said that buzzword when that's the same buzzword, and this is the same trend that's happening, is that there's this anti-trend happening in the churches as part of, I think, just a natural reformation and regression period after the whole MAGA movement.
What's interesting about this part to me too is,
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that this is exactly what apologetics is, right? So many of us realize that if we already know we're the fools that went down the apologetic rabbit hole. We fell for the fucking distraction, and then we found a fucking community of other fucking dumbasses who were like way down the bottom of that rabbit hole. So we just kept going even deeper down the rabbit hole together, because then we were having fun with our friends. Gang, we're fucked. I don't know. They got us with the okey doke, but what do we really get in 90% of quote unquote Christian apologetics? We get nothing that has shit to do with Jesus, the gospel, the Bible, none of that. We literally get, how can you have morality without God? Where did it all come from? What about contingency? What about...
They don't even try to defend the blood magic. It's indefensible, and they know it, so they hide it.
So is it not moral theism? Is that not what they are into? Just weird philosophical moral deism. It's the exact same thing.
They go to that place as a defense mechanism, right? When they want to hide the fascism, they present it as this: Jesus just loved everybody, and I just have a personal relationship with Jesus, right? And they never tell you that they're anti-gay. They never tell you that they're, racist, bigoted, misogynistic, narcissistic, all of the illnesses that come with Christianity and the mind poison that it is.
Yes.
Or any cult that's like it. And
now that's what
Christianity.
That's what I think when somebody tells me they're a Christian. I mean, I really think at this point, if you're part of the bigotry, once you reach a certain point. I obviously wouldn't say that to a child, or
I think it's important to shock children. I mean, not in a way that's going to traumatize them, but in a way that can be eye-opening at that young age. No. I'm with you. I 100% support. I actually support actively, like, getting children out of it, and like getting children out of the religion, and I support telling them straight up it's not true. Yeah,
right.
Anything else is child abuse, in my opinion.
Yeah, like the same way. I don't think it's immoral to tell children that Santa Claus isn't real or that there is no tooth fairy. Like you might have fun playing with them for
Okay, I disagree on those. Those are culturally accepted, falsehoods. But I think serves a purpose.
So this is what I'm saying. Like I'm saying I think it's okay to like do it with them for a little bit. Like play along, like do the tooth fairy, do Santa Claus. But then like if they ask you about it, or once they get to an age, right, then you like my mom.
They
like
piece it together, eventually you give it up. Yeah.
Yes,
and that will help them realize.
Exactly. Like for me, it was my mom sent me to get some groceries or some shit out of the trunk, and forgot that the presents were in there or whatever. But
if there was a cult of Santa Claus, then I absolutely would not, I would not play into it whatsoever.
Yeah.
So the context matters.
Yeah. So I think for kids, it's like, it's okay in that same regard, especially once they reach a certain age, to like let them know that this isn't true. And to me, that just could be part of education. Yeah.
Of morally,
I think
and so
real quick, sorry.
Yeah.
Mandatory theology course. I mean, I don't know why we aren't teaching theology, philosophy, and history of religion. That should be all required courses for a high school diploma.
Yeah, it should. It honestly should, especially because we just need it. I think the power structure is completely sold out to Christianity in this country, right? Like most of our elected officials identify as Christian. So even if they're, not hardcore, they know they can't say anything that really goes against it or tips their hand that, it isn't true or whatever. The same thing can be said of the corporate level. Like corporate America is just Christianese, and it's not even like y'all don't even know. Like I'm not even saying like Chick-fil-A, right? I'm not talking about a Christian company that's closed on Sunday, and the fucking the CEOs are evangelical boards. I'm talking about General Electric. I'm talking about Maytag. I'm talking about just companies you have no reason to think they're affiliated with Christianity at all. If you actually work there, especially the higher and higher levels you get, you realize, holy shit, it's all people who at least socially identify as Christian. And if you don't, it's like you're so much less likely to be seen as, a good person, promotable. Like Christian is like, oh, so just a good Christian. Oh, that means they're going to be a great manager type shit. Like, so really, the sort of corporate financial structure is all sorts of Christian fucked. And then that bleeds into everywhere, right? Because then let's say like academia is fucked. Why? Because academia is always trying to suck teeth and get fucking money. And if the government and the fucking corporations are all sucking the Christian teat, what do you think the fucking university's gonna do? Right? Like, so it just fucks everything. And so again, like, to me, and I hate to put the responsibility on somebody else, and I try not to do so completely. I think those of us that can really be more direct and open up to the people in our lives should do so. I haven't figured out how to do so successfully, right? I think part of that is a trick. That's a trick, right? So like, for instance, like in dealing with like date coaching, you know, helping people with their trying to meet people or whatever, right? There's a thing called analysis paralysis, right? That's when you see somebody across the bar you really want to talk to and you're sitting on your chair, but you can't figure out, you know, how to approach them, what to say, how it might go. You're trying to work through all the scenarios and you sit there for the time before you know it, you turn around, either somebody else is talking to them or they're leaving. It would have been better to just go do something. Just go, right? Just, yeah, that's why I always tell people the best pickup, my favorite pickup line is, "Hi, my name is Jay. It's nice to meet you." I never have to think about it. I don't have to remember it. I don't have to remember shit. Like, it's just, it either works or it doesn't. If somebody's interested in me, it leads to a conversation. If they're not, it won't. But like, we do the same thing when we talk about talking to our families, right? We watch so many streams and we read all these books. We're trying to figure out, like, what is the magic approach to take? Do I do the Socratic method? You know, do I try to be direct? Do I try to talk about myself? Do I talk about the trauma I think the religion's called? I don't know. It's just like just tell them you don't believe it. Like, I don't know. Like, so yeah, I do think we have some personal agency there, but I really think we need a sort of more mass media, you know, the sort of big dogs in public communication really trying to lead this conversation. And I think they have plenty of reason to, given the, you know, the sort of white evangelicalism of January 6th, for instance, the sort of whacked out COVID response, consistently coming from religious groups, just given the sheer trend of, you know, the non-believers being the fastest growing religious group, and, you know, sort of this mass exodus from churches we're seeing. Like, there's plenty of fucking stories to give you reason to cover and to now talk about, like, wow, like, where does this really go? You know, talk about the fact that there's this growing group of non-believers and nobody in fucking Congress to represent them. Like, we could just sit here forever and come up with stories, but they won't do it. And if they don't, I hate to say it, but like, that's how so much of America still figures out what's going on, or, you know, what the changing times are, or what we're doing. And it's just going to be hard because we don't have a lot of large platforms. We don't have a Fox News. We don't have, you know, we barely have more than a handful of content creators who even have like more than, say, 1 million or 2 million subscribers. So I don't know. I would really like to see more from mass media, but as y'all know, I don't expect it.
I want to create a message that can help you do that. And a lot of messages these days reflect that intent. But is that it? Is that all that God has for us? How often is the gospel actually being preached? How often are you talking about what Jesus has done and what ramifications that has for us today? Or is it all just, man, this is how you can have better relationships, or this is how you can, you know, forgive this person? It's like, okay, that might be nice stuff to talk about, but if you don't get to the source of the solution, then what do we even have? And just referencing Jesus offhand isn't enough. The last area that I want to talk about that I think is really problematic in terms of manipulation within the church is this idea of gaslighting you when you see a problem. Like, I see this all the time. People will kind of come away from these churches and they'll say, yeah, there was kind of a lack of accountability, and all of a sudden they'll be like, no, there's not. They're just a bunch of haters. One of the clear examples.
So again, he's literally sitting here and now he's going to talk to us about gaslighting in the church, like a whole topic, a whole section on it. And while he gaslights, it's just
of
crazy.
This more recently that I've seen is Michael Todd, and he wore this T-shirt of his wife in a bikini, and people got upset about it because they're like, "Hey, that's obviously inappropriate." Like, even a non-Christian could see, like, yeah, you're on stage at church and you have a T-shirt, just very obviously of your wife in a bikini, and for people that are watching, they don't even know it's your wife, so for all they know, it's just some random lady in a bikini on your shirt as you're trying to preach about Jesus. It's very questionable, right? Everyone would have questions. You wouldn't blame them for that. And yet Michael Todd comes on the next day or the next week and he says, oh, it's church people. I can't stand these church people. They're so uptight. They're so, I'm just showing off my wife kind of thing. And we're like, oh, wow. Oh, like, I guess I'm in the wrong. Like, we're being gaslit to think that we're crazy, even though we point out something that everybody would point out. Now, this is not new with Michael Todd. There've been other pastors.
But again, please notice, like, just the who gives a fuckness of all of this. This is just so, this is supposed to be an issue, and this is causing an uprising. This is causing the upheaval, and I have seen actually a lot of Christians making content about this and all of this type of bullshit. Please notice how this is not a real problem in the world. A man wore a T-shirt with a woman on it in a bikini, and it happened to be a woman he was married to. I can't think of a thing I care about less. I can't think. I mean, I cannot think of a thing I care about less. And again, the Christians are like, he's causing us to lust, to covet.
I gotta go. I'll be right back, but I'll be right back.
All right.
Throughout the years that have been the vision casting leader. And in a lot of ways, they almost kind of speak for God within their church, that this is the direction they want to go. This is the decision that they're making. So everybody else just kind of conforms and they go along with it. And when they make a mistake, they maybe take accountability in some ways, but ultimately it's like they're trying to change things up. They're trying to be edgy because they're trying to reach people. And you're here just the Pharisee judging them. You can see it so clearly that it is just about the retention of power. And I think that's so dangerous when you have a church structure that's oriented that way. When a church grows so quickly based on a charismatic leader, as opposed to just kind of the solid biblical teaching that's coming out of it and people being attracted to the teaching, as opposed to kind of this kind of charismatic person that's a personality or social media influencer that everyone wants to go to their church now because they do the coolest analogies or they have the coolest clothes or all those other things that aren't as important. You get in a tricky space when that's why people are drawn that way, because it gives people that particular person an inflated ego or perspective of themselves. And I know how this is. Like, I don't have a church, but I have a YouTube channel, and you got to watch yourself to be like, oh, I have all these subscribers, so that means that I have, really something to say, or my word goes, or I have authority in this issue. But for me, it's about like, ultimately, I'm not perfect at this, but trying to recognize, no, I have a lot to learn. There's a lot of missteps that I can make here, and I should be aware of when I do make those, and to ask for forgiveness or take down videos and remove things that are incorrect and try to approach it in a humble way. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but it is a lot harder when all of a sudden you have thousands and thousands of people in front of you every week and they're listening and hanging on your every word. It can be really easy to just want to retain that power. For an overseer as God's steward must be above reproach. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain. Now, I feel like there's been a lot of bad news that has been shared in this video, a lot of downers, maybe a little depressed. You're seeing this.
And again, this is this type of bullshit, like, where Christians, the wisdom in the Bible is so unimpressive. Like, it's just so unimpressive. Well, an overseer should not be a fucking asshole, and if he is not worthy to be an overseer. A worker should be paid their day's work in wages. Love thy neighbor. like, this is divine wisdom. Please notice how God, Jesus, none of them fools never managed to teach you fucking anything that you couldn't get from that poem. Everything I needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten. Gang, please go fuck yourself. We're gonna do this. I haven't looked at this on stream. Boop, 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 boop. All right, let's see. This was like this poster was like the jam back in the day. But of course, my computer's taking forever. Come on, computer. Come on, computer. Let's see if we can get an image of it. Here, I'm gonna find it. Go ahead. Roll tape.
Churches that you've attended, or things you watch online, or things your friends watch online, and you're kind of disappointed and discouraged in some ways, I do want to let you know there is good news. Like, God can draw a straight line with a crooked stick. People have said, hey, I've been positively impacted by these preachers, teachers, or churches, and I think that's great. Like, God can do amazing things to, broken vessels. That's what he's in the business of doing. Does that mean that we continue to approve of all that these churches and these folks and these pastors are doing simply because a couple people have been positively impacted, or maybe even quite a few people have been positively impacted despite the error? No, it doesn't.
Gang, please go fuck yourself. Check out this list. Most of what I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sand pile at Sunday school. These are the things I learned. Share everything, play fair, don't hit people, put things back where you found them, clean up your own mess, don't take things that aren't yours, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody, wash your hands before you eat, flush, warm cookies and cold milk are good for you, live a balanced life, learn some and think some, and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands and stick together, be aware of wonder. Gang, please notice. Oh, look, this is the version that was like hanging up in my the house my dad lived in when I was growing up in Newark. I was hanging, so that's how I was familiar with it. I used to read it sitting there on the stairs. But gang, please notice how we didn't have to write like a sacred text that was multiple thousands of pages and excuse genocide, and we didn't need a handbook on slavery and blood magic and all of this fucking sacrificial nonsense. It's crazy. Again, their wisdom is just so unimpressive. So unimpressive.
Doesn't mean that we need to give our full approval. We can praise God that He does, bring good out of bad situations. It is my hope, though. That these churches would return or come to the first time to the simplicity of the gospel, and that through that their worship, their teaching, their culture would all be reformed. The truth is, you can't manipulate people into the kingdom. You just can't. Your strategies and your methods are going to be for naught if you're not holding to the true gospel. And so that is what we should value the most. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe because I'm putting out new content all the time. A huge shout out to everyone on Patreon.
Unfortunately. Oh, man. That was fun. All right. I want to thank Lena so much for joining me. It was really great having some help breaking this down. And yeah, just the total lack of self-awareness and not realizing that apologetics is doing the same goddamn thing. It is just repeating the same shit over and over and over again, manipulating people, gaslighting them, arguing for some bullshit moralistic deism, and then like what that's all Christianity is. Please give this man what he wants. Please take away all of the worship services and the smoke machines. Fuck it, I'll come out and say, just take all that shit away. Again, see how many people still go to church. You will experience a rapid decline in church attendance. Why? Because people go for the show. That's what it is. That's what's crazy. It's like wow. Yeah, I know. Sometimes like you be in a band, you be like the pastor be all like hating on the band. You be like, we're trying to set things up for you. We're the opening act and you're the main act. What is the problem? We open the show for you, and then once you walk off, we close this thing down with a couple of songs. But they know the people there to see it, and they wish people were there to see them as much as they were there to see the show. But they're not. That's not how people work. And again, apologetics is the same bullshit. It is just the same bullshit, except it's sitting around talking about arguments, sitting around talking about evidence, sitting around talking about the true theology. All a bunch of bullshit. All a bunch of bullshit. But look, gang, we're going to kick back. I'm going to get to gather, get some food, and play some games, have some fun. It's Saturday. We will see you tomorrow afternoon for the Blackout at 1 and Hot Program at 3:30. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are not already, and we'll see you next time. Set 'em gone.